We are witnessing and living through what we call a societal transition.
Part of the reason regional migration is so high is cost of living. It's generally cheaper housing.
We're on the cusp of trying to shift a large majority of our population growth to regional areas, and that can't be done unless the strategic planning is in place.
Welcome to Real Talk, realestate.com.au's property news podcast, with your host, Alice Piper.
The latest regional index shows regional migration is currently 1.8% above the average levels recorded during the height of COVID lockdowns and 19.8% higher than pre-pandemic times. This proves that the regional dream is well and truly alive amongst nearly 1 in 5 Aussies. So then why are we not decentralising our cities more? Joining me to unpack what it would take to regionalise our country is Liz Ritchie, Chief Executive of Regional Australia Institute, and Joseph van Dyke, Director of Hygge Property in Ballarat, a design-led development bringing considered and sustainable urban living to regional Australia. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, guys. Liz, it fascinates me that regional migration is higher than pre-pandemic levels, considering a lot of media would actually have you believe that people are coming back to the city in droves. Can you explain, firstly, how do we get this figure? What exactly counts as regional?
The Regional Movers Index is a partnership that we have with the Commonwealth Bank. And as one of Australia's largest banks, they have a client base of over 10 million. Mm-hmm. And what we actually do is their data is de-identified, but we track movers who've relocated from either city to region or now in some cases region to region. Mm-hmm. I guess the parameters of that is that they have to have been in their new postcode for a minimum of 6 months to be counted. It gives us trend lines. And I guess this is why we created the Regional Movers Index, because we've got a target within our regionalisation ambition to reach 11 million people by 2032 living in regional Australia. And so we didn't want to wait for ABS data, which only comes out once a year, and it's 12 months old. It informs us about where people are moving and helps you understand sort of investment focus that we need to have.
What's the draw card for regional living?
What we saw in the last 10 years pre-COVID is that in that census period, we saw for the first time growth to regional Australia rather than the other way around. And what we've seen in the most recent census period is a tripling of that figure. So sort of net gain in the 2021 census of 170,000 people calling regional Australia home. What this tells us and why this is important in my message to decision makers is that we are witnessing and living through what we call a societal transition. The last decade has shown us that we don't want to be a nation of megacities. We don't want to just continue to grow Melbourne, Sydney, Perth and Brisbane. These cities are already experiencing mass congestion and therefore reduction in productivity, pollution associated with that. So all the benefits that economists will talk about when you have the benefits of agglomeration in a capital city, they are no longer available to us in our major capital cities as a nation because we're actually too crowded. We're not getting the benefits economically.
If I could add to that, I think part of the reason regional migration is so high is cost of living. It's generally cheaper housing. People tend to enjoy a more balanced and relaxed lifestyle than sitting in traffic for sometimes what is 1 to 2 hours if you live in the outer suburbs. But Jo, you're a Ballarat local now, but you were born and bred in Horsham. Tell us, why are you so passionate about regional living?
It's probably resonating a lot of those comments that Liz made, understanding and having lived that quality of life and the opportunity to raise our children and progress that through next generations. I can leave home at 8 o'clock, drop the kids off at school and be in the office within 10 minutes. And then we give our children the opportunity to experience 4 or 5 different sports after school on a daily basis, and the quality of life, saving that commute. And then one of the key reasons my wife and I returned to regional areas was to be able to give back to a community. We watched our parents contribute to community, being involved in community means more than taking your kids to sport, dropping them off and going. It's helping out at Auskick or being on the school board or turning the snags at the footy barbecue on the weekend. And being present in those communities is exceptionally important. It creates a social connection that I think is very difficult to replicate in an urban area.
The data shows that migration from the city to the regions now accounts for 11.3% of all internal migration. Now, that is compared to 8.3% for people going the other way. So that's people who are regional moving to the city. It takes net internal migration to a 2-year high, that 11.3%. Look, interestingly, the top 3 LGAs that saw the most amount of migration was Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Greater Geelong in Victoria, and that was followed by Lake Macquarie in New South Wales. Joe, how is the housing market going to keep up with this? Because a huge part of regionalising our country is actually giving people somewhere to live.
My first answer is I would say it starts with strategic planning. When state governments and local councils have good strategic plans in place, it helps the community to understand the housing types and forms that will be provided along the journey, and it makes the statutory process, the process for each individual home or homes afterwards a lot easier. It defines a way a city or a town will grow for 15, 20, 25 years and provides then subsequently developers or builders the clarity about the planning process moving forward. I think now is a great time, especially in Victoria, to make those decisions because we have a state government who's tending towards supporting more efficient planning outcomes, but we're on the cusp of trying to shift a large majority of our population growth to regional areas, and that can't be done unless the strategic planning is in place. I think the plan for Victoria calls for something like 77,000 dwellings in Ballarat across the next 15 or 20 years. But the type and form of that remains unknown largely at the moment, and that causes anxiety in the existing community, but doesn't provide any clarity to the people who need to build those homes.
So what types of initiatives is Hygge Property doing and in what regions? Because I understand you guys work in more than just Ballarat.
We have projects in Geelong, Ballarat, Daylesford, other areas across regional Victoria and also South Australia. We provide diversity of housing which we believe otherwise wouldn't exist. So we understand and recognise there are the trends that Liz's data helps inform, what type of buyers are moving into what sort of areas and what they're looking for. The largest majority of the market we've seen over the last few years has been local downsizers, so people who have raised their children in a context of a Ballarat or Geelong and looking for a lower maintenance lifestyle, but not necessarily downsizing the home.
How's the popularity of these projects? Who's buying the homes? And you just mentioned downsizers, but what about families and first home buyers?
What I think we're seeing is that those downsizers are buying the more expensive homes. They're slower to move at the moment because they're uncertain about politics and the economy and other external factors. We're seeing a lot of women who are either divorced, widowed, or seeking a lifestyle change, moving to regional areas. We're seeing young families move into the homes that the downsizers are leaving.
That also happens in the city, but now we're just kind of seeing it more in a regional context as well. I imagine it is more affordable to build and buy in the country. Can you give me a bit of an explanation of what you can get and how this might differ from inner Melbourne? Like the median price in my suburb in inner city Melbourne is $1.4 million. What would you be getting?
1.4 could get you a 3-bedroom apartment on, say, level 5 of a building in the middle of Ballarat, or it could get you a renovated period home, weatherboard period home within 2 or 3 blocks of Ballarat's main boulevard on 1,200 square metres with a pickleball court or a basketball court or whatever your kids are into at the moment. But, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 2 living areas, within walking distance to your school, a quick bike ride to the train station, and 6 or 7 cafes within walking distance and a good pub.
What are the biggest challenges in meeting this demand? Is it acquiring land, number one, but is it also acquiring land that's ready to build on right away? Or is it things like building supplies and construction costs, which is not just affecting the regions, obviously it's affecting nationwide? What are the barriers you're seeing at the moment?
It's a number of those issues. Victoria, more specifically, it has been planning, and now it's more sentiment-driven and based because the buyers, whilst we know they're out there, aren't choosing to buy right now. There's going to be a wave of catch-up over the next few years. Planning has been hard. Construction was hard, is improving. We're finding that builders and subcontractors are more than content to travel from Western Melbourne to Ballarat rather than Western Melbourne to Cremorne or Richmond. The cost to build and the cost for consultants is the same, whether it's in Ballarat, Geelong, Bendigo or Melbourne largely. The cost difference is typically in the land cost base. So, 1,000 square metre block of land in Ballarat might be 1 or 2 million as opposed to 10 to 20 million in Melbourne.
Liz, while housing is a major factor in regionalising the country, can you chat us through what are the factors that draw people to regional centres?
Housing has become one of those major drivers, but we did research in 2020, so again, just pre-pandemic, which told us that actually the things that people were looking for were around the elements of time in their life, more time for their family. And I think Joe's story reflects that both in volunteerism, but the amount of sports and activity that you're able to have in your life. They were also looking for more connection with the environment, so natural amenity, etc., connection to local community. We're all regional in this podcast today. We've all got those stories of our parents, and mine are the same, president of the tennis club, president of the art society. And these are parts of our identity and help shape who you become as a human being and your life experience. And so often we hear people who are returners, and I can share my own story. That's what I'm looking for my family, to be part of a local community. And I think what happened with COVID, and I think this is well documented, that sense of isolation was so palpable that we're now grappling with record levels of mental health across this country. And so what do you do to change that? Well, people are thinking really holistically about their lives, moving to the regions, finding an affordable home, grappling with that cost of living that we know is very real. We've done a lot of other research that supports this. So they're really the factors that are driving people.
If I could just add to that, I think two other factors that drive people to the regions, firstly, is the job market. That needs to be part of it. And also great infrastructure. Like if we look at the regional job market, the latest figures show that regional job vacancies rose in September 2024 to more than 75,000 vacancies. Now, that was the first increase since March 2024. This does reflect quite a strong demand for jobs in regional areas. In big businesses like Cotton On Group and WorkSafe are now based in regional Victoria, just outside of Geelong. Target headquarters is now in Williams Landing. That's about halfway between Geelong and Melbourne. What that's doing is now giving tens of thousands of people the opportunity to both live and work regionally. A lot of people are wanting to move regional, but the job is not as flexible and it doesn't really offer them that opportunity. Do you think, Liz, that we need to see more big businesses doing this to make regionalising our cities more viable, having their home base somewhere that's not necessarily CBD Melbourne, CBD Sydney?
Well, unsurprisingly, my answer is yes, Alan. Yes. I spend a lot of time talking about the benefits of flexible hybrid remote work, what this brings to regional communities. The examples that you've just given about regionally headquartered businesses like Cotton On, fantastic. And Geelong has absolutely grown off the back of that. A number of other corporate headquarters have made their way to Geelong. There's a big debate about work from home at the moment, but I mean, the stats are there, hovering around 40% the workforce at the moment, and a very strong sentiment that working from home, at least part of their role or part of their week, is a prerequisite for what people are looking for in their lives. And as I say, the genie's out of the bottle. You can't get it back in. We have actually shown what's possible. And whilst there's a lot of research out there, there's no research that actually shows a reduction in productivity. So given that we have a productivity issue, this is something that we really need to be thinking seriously about. Our institute, we're a national organisation. I'm now regionally headquartered running this business. It can be done, and the benefits are very real for regional Australia. So the more that we can create a truly national employment market, the better for this nation.
Jo, what about Ballarat? Do you have any insight into people who might be living locally, working city, or are they living and working locally?
Could give you several family examples or family friend examples where they work for national businesses headquartered out of Western Australia or out of Melbourne or Adelaide who work remotely because they have client bases. But their lifestyle choice is becoming first. Doesn't mean they're any less productive, as Liz sort of mentioned.
If anything, I think it makes them more.
We know in Ballarat, we're jealous of Geelong in respect that they have WorkSafe, TAC, Cotton On, and several other large groups like that headquartered over those areas. Ballarat's been fortunate to gain Accenture and an EY satellite office recently. We think that government needs to lead in that space. Couldn't understand why V-Line, Victoria's regional transport provider is headquartered in Melbourne, or why the Country Fire Authority is headquartered out of Melbourne. If groups like that can be moved to regional areas, other private enterprise will follow.
We have covered quite a bit in terms of what are the key factors that are going to drive people regional but keep people regional, what's needed to kind of make it work. Liz, is there anything from your side that you think we haven't covered that is going to be pivotal in terms of regional growth?
Well, I mean, I think it speaks to the topic of housing in a big way. There's never a meeting that I attend where housing is not sort of top of the list in terms of priority, particularly for our regional, local LGAs and regional constituents. And so from a policy perspective, we've been calling on governments of the day to ensure that where there is investment, and there is a lot of investment at the moment making its way or trying to make its way towards housing developments, and we've got some, substantial targets over the next 10 years, 1.2 million dwellings. But what we're not seeing is this dedicated targeted figure that will make its way to regional Australia, and that is our ask. It's one thing to put a target out there, it's another thing to put the money behind it, but it won't reach the regional communities in the way that we need it to unless we are really focused on ensuring that at least 40% of that investment makes its way to regional communities. So in thinking about how we regionalise as a nation and support the growth that's already underway, we have to cordon off funding and ensure that regional communities aren't left behind.
Jo, what's one thing that you think we need to consider if we are going to grow regional areas and turn them into micro-cities?
Can I give you two?
Yeah, go for it.
I agree with Liz. I think a population plan which is linked to an infrastructure plan which is linked to out of election cycle funding, like a separate silo or bucket of funding that ties and holds governments out of cycle accountable to that population growth and that infrastructure growth is critical. And the second thing is the ability to upskill our tertiary education sectors in regional areas. So if a student out of nil secondary college wants to study medicine, they can do that in Ballarat, or they can do that in Ararat or Horsham, which then solves the whole healthcare and professional services issue that is very prominent in areas outside big cities.
I hadn't actually thought of that, but that's also a great point. Look, thank you so much for coming on today, guys. It's been quite insightful for me and I've really enjoyed myself, so I hope you guys have too.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. All information provided is general advice and opinion based on current market conditions. These opinions should not be treated as investment advice. Always obtain advice based on your individual circumstances.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.